Hello, everybody. I see we've got Quindy and Zachariah and Valander in the chat. I guess let me know if you can hear me. Um, so I'm running a little late. I missed a few weeks because I got sick. Finally got COVID. My friends were joking around with me that, if we'd waited just a few more days, it wouldn't have been a pandemic anymore. And I consider myself very lucky that it was pretty mild, but it does seem like it takes a little while to get over. And I'll admit I'm not 100% today, but I miss you guys and I miss painting because I haven't really been painting miniatures. I mean, even kind of before I got sick, I was distracted with other projects and things, so I hadn't been painting much. And then after I got sick, I'm doing that. If you were here a few weeks ago, I was talking about an oil painting class that I'm taking. So I fell behind in that as well, and I've been putting a lot of work in on that when I have painting time to try to catch up so that I can submit things and get feedback, and because that's part of the value of taking a class in real time, and I don't want to miss my opportunities. I've been kind of like a week behind, and it's fun. I don't think he reads email at all. He's very much an artist. I don't think he reads a lot. I mean, he may read books or whatever, but I don't think he's into spending a lot of time on email communication. So I explained in the mail that I'm sending in like the previous week's homework essentially because of being sick, and he just gets to the picture and he puts all the pictures on his computer and then goes through and gives them a critique. And it's very helpful to hear what he says to other people too. And I do recommend that if you're on groups where people are giving each other feedback, or you come to ReaperCon and you're standing in line behind someone and they're getting feedback from one of the artists, if it doesn't seem rude, listen to what the critique is, and because sometimes it's easier to see things on other people's stuff, but it can still sort of sink in and you can apply it to your things. Like, I really feel like over the years I learned a lot about miniature painting reading and listening to the critiques of other people's miniatures. Like back in the day on Cool Mini, people used to write stuff in the comments, and the ReaperCon forums are a very friendly place, so there may not be like super harsh critique, which is good. We all need a sanctuary where we can expect to not have our little hearts ripped out. But there are probably other forums or groups online. Maybe there's a section in the Discord. I don't know, because as we all know, I'm too old and I always forget to go to the Discord. Let me just check that people can actually hear me. Yes, people seem to hear me. And there's Bob and Julie. And I missed you all too. Even though I kind of felt like I relapsed a little today. I'm like, no, I want to do the show because I miss hanging out with everybody and feeling like my life is getting back to normal. Sometimes when I get sick, like not, super sick. I'm not comparing this to things, some people had very, very bad cases of COVID, and this is nothing like that. But even just with a cold or whatever, sometimes I think the part that annoys me is just, it's like it knocks you off track from wherever you were, and you have to, all this stuff that had become a habit or a routine, it's like you have to reforge that, and I just find that very exhausting. And I relate to Sisyphus rolling the rock back up over and over and over again. It's like, why can't I just learn a thing once and call it good? But anyway, what am I going to do today? What an excellent question that I don't have an answer to. So I've been working on this guy, and part of me feels like I regret that I didn't take the mold lines off and I want to paint it for real. So I'm debating whether to just leave it where it is and get another copy, and do a little bit of a scene with some Easter eggs and stuff like that. Because these here are just so prominent. I was debating, can I use the brush on sealer trick, where you kind of put that next to the mold line and you can build it up and smooth things out. So I'm wrestling with that. And also, I didn't know if you all were like gonna want to see another week of that right away, at least. Excuse me. Hey, Valander. I got my new arm, so hopefully when I knock into this, it's not going to jiggle so much, because it's nice, it's all metal, and I'm not sure I've got all of even to adjust everything, you have to use an Allen key, but I'm not sure I tightened everything up so much that it won't get knocked off. But my hope is that now it'll be really easy to do setup and more consistent in where the view angles and stuff. But we will see today if I was correct about because there's kind of a sweet spot for where the distance between the camera and the miniature for keeping things in focus. And then there's also a sweet spot between the miniature and my eyes for keeping things in focus. So I have to, the trick is matching those so that I can see and you guys can see. I do that too. I'm often wondering why I leave mold lines. Zachariah says, hey, the Mini Mad Cat is rating with a party of 10. Hello, Mini Mad Cat and Raiders. Raven's Hobby. Yep, here's Rocky. I was painting like the Easter Dragon for a couple of weeks. I'm debating whether I'm going to keep going with that. Oh, I see another Raiders for Banana Wanana. I probably didn't put enough O's in there. Il T Cat 2. No, 2 T Cat 2. I'm so bad at reading online names. Well, I mean, not like I'm great with in-person names either. I'm very glad that I didn't become a school teacher and have to attempt to navigate the roll call list. I'm sure I would have been very bad at that. Hey, Mini Mad Cat. I'm glad to be a little more back on my feet too, because I have all these things I want to do, and it's just so frustrating when you can't do things. And ReaperCon's coming up. So I was wanting right before I got sick. My plan had been to update some of my articles on my blog about. I have one that's contests at conventions and shows, and that one's almost updated. I'm just waiting to hear back from someone who does hobby events at a convention to get a little more information. I didn't bring my secondary lamp, so this is gonna be a little dark. Sorry. I put it under the regular light if there's like a specific color thing we need to see. So I'm almost ready to post that, and then I also have been working on. I did an article a couple years ago that's kind of specific to the MSP Open at ReaperCon. So the kind of feedback you get, or just if you haven't attended before, it's a really excellent contest because you're competing against yourself. So the judges, and it's a team, so you don't have to worry about one person doesn't like whatever color you use, or they don't like ogres, or whatever you chose to do, or whatever. You don't have to worry about that because it's a team of 3, and judges actually sort of get training to help us not consider those kinds of things. But how the categories work is like, if you've been to like a convention where it'll be like single figure fantasy, kind of regular gaming size, and then it'll be like monster or large figure or something. ReaperCon, the MSP Open doesn't divide the categories up like that, so the categories are more. And I think I'll do a show where I talk about this more, or I wouldn't be surprised if Michael at the Crow's Nest, because he's the director who kind of organizes the contest, he almost always does a show, but they've changed their format, so I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Mini Mad Cat says, Texans are lucky getting ReaperCon on their doorsteps. Envy. It is worth, if you can, and I know that it is not feasible for a lot of people to travel to conventions. If you can, it is very much. If you're into miniatures, it is like one of the top 2. I think that and Adepticon are the 2 shows I would recommend the most if you really want to get bang for your buck for a trip. There are other great shows and conventions, and that's why I've got this list that I'm working on updating, because there's stuff all over the world. Well, okay, mostly I just have Europe and the US, but if people hear of anything, I'm very eager to add to this page. So it's going to have like the webpage link, and then because these things are like volunteer organized, sometimes they aren't so great about updating the webpage, so I'm including Facebook or other ways that you can contact people and get information. But anyway, the other page that I'm about to update, so I'll probably upload these today or tomorrow. So these articles already exist on my website. I'm just going to update them. Especially the one with the conventions needs new dates, and some of the web pages and stuff changed. But the other one explains how the categories work and how the scoring works and all this stuff of the MSP Open that might seem a little Byzantine if you're not used to it, I guess. So this is a figure that I had worked on the show some time ago, and I was working on Dark Skin, and then, well, actually, Dark Skin was a different show, but I did it again here, and then I wanted to work on hair, so I did, like, this was curly hair, and I had one with straight hair, and then there was one with some other kind of hair that I do not currently recall, but I liked her, so I wanted to work on her some more, so I did, like, well, that's not chain mail, the scale mail, and the shield, and then I kind of put her away and didn't get back to her. So I thought it might be fun to get back to her. I kind of wanted to paint a monster, but I couldn't find one. There was an auction or something locally for charity for doing, supporting D&D clubs at schools, and I ended up, the guy was very persuasive in strong-arming me to donate things to the auction. I didn't have anything painted, which is what he really wanted, but I'm like, okay, I have a bunch of unpainted like monsters and stuff because that's what he wanted most. So I'm going to turn that sound off just for a second and use my favorite hobby tool, well, one of my favorite hobby tools, which is this compressed dust. So this has been sitting on my shelf for like 3 months or more, and I have a definite dust problem in my house, so I don't want to start painting on here and like adhere the dust forever to the miniature, so I'm going to spritz it with this. So I recommend getting some of this stuff to dust your collection if you have it out on shelves, but I also use it to, if you press it just kind of half strength, you can pop bubbles. If you've done, like when I was painting this scale mail, I very likely, because I rush and I add bubbles to my paint, so then I pop them with that. The mini Mad Cat is in the UK, and a small boy trying to grow, but I have a dream of getting the States this year, if not this, the next. I'm pretty sure there are some shows in the UK. There was one that it sounds like the person who was organizing it is no longer able to do it. I put a link to the Facebook page anyway because he seemed open to somebody else taking the show over. Mini Mad Cat is asking whether they can share the Rocky that they painted, and as Quindy is mentioning, links are not available on the channel, unfortunately. So, oh, you've been to a few shows in England this year. So if you go read my article, then email me and tell me what other shows I need to add, because I don't think I have all the stuff there. Now, I am just collecting the ones that have like contests. If they have a lot of other events and not a contest, I might add that too. So when I first painted her, what I was thinking would be fun is to paint her overcoat, dress, whatever this piece of clothing is called, a sort of a peachy color, because I kind of have this, I think peach and on dark browns, peach looks great on people with darker skin tones. I like that color combo, but I also sort of have this like mental block against how you make peach with paint. I don't know what that is, but I thought it would be a fun challenge. Maybe it's just I have one of those colors that I have a very specific definition of. So mainly I just have the paints from the Learn to Paint kits and expansion sets, which I'm sure Quindy will pop a link into the chat for the website, for where on Reaper's website you can buy those. Because I kind of use that as my default color set for the show, and then I still have the Rocky colors too. So this was a color I had out for Rocky. And this lava orange is a color from, I'm going to go with an expansion set, maybe? I think it's from one of the expansion sets that released relatively recently, even though I worked on them 1 million years ago. So this is why I don't know exactly what's in them. Like it. It's a little pow. Like if we put this on her, that is going to be like all that you look at. So let's not do that. I am going to add a little more of the pink. I think I went too orange. So I need to dull this down. Dulling things down is actually like easy, like not mixing mud. Like people talk about how you mix mud. Not mixing mud is more of a trick sometimes. But there are a variety of different ways to desaturate colors, and they can kind of have different effects, so it is useful to know the different ways. So for funsies, let's try some. So this is a mixed gray in. I could mix a lighter gray, but I don't have one. Mixing the color complement in can work, so this is orangey pink, so something greeny blue. And you don't have to be exact, like you don't have to get the exact opposite color for this to work. You can kind of be in the ballpark. Like even if I put purple in, that would probably work. And then like brown is kind of a reliable way to do this as well. I was putting most of those browns back because they all kind of have a color lean. Like one's very green, one's very orange, and one's very yellow. And I actually want more of a just blah brown in the middle, but this is a work with what I got situation. What I got is a big crusty gloop on my paint bottle. But that just pops off. And it doesn't damage the paint or anything. It's just paint gathered up in there and stuck to the lid, or the tip, instead of sticking to the lid. What am I missing in chat here? Zachariah uses an airbrush at high PSI to dedust, and that is an excellent thing to do. I don't keep my airbrush set up all the time, so I find it easier to get the duster out. I don't trust my cats or myself not to knock that around and damage it. But if you're someone who's used to using an airbrush and you have an airbrush out all the time, that is probably better than how I do it. Mini Mad Cat went to Salute and Hammerhead. Partisan was this weekend. Boyle? Maybe I didn't bump my text size up again. Is later in the year, and obviously UK Games Expo is in a few weeks. Do those all have contests with them? Because if they do, I definitely want to look up the information and add them to my list. All right, so we'll start with the gray. And it is probably much more powerful than my color, which indeed it is. So I added a little too much. So that really knocks it down. Like, it's pretty much a skin color at this point. All right, I'm looking for a test paper. Show you. Not that it being a skin color is bad, but that's how, if you have a skin color that's too orangey, you are now also discovering the secret. Well, actually, let's say the color's better. The secret of making it look more natural. So this blue is probably much more potent than this. So I'm just going to try and take just a little bit. And it kind of has like a softer, more colorful effect. Again, it is sort of a skin tone, which is suggesting to me that we need just a very tiny bit of whatever I do in the main blob. And then because this is kind of yellowy, it keeps it much more orange. So I think I'm going to go with the blue. Well, actually, I should have grabbed just a little bit here from the edge. Hopefully I didn't get that in yet, so that we can compare the final version. And I've been having lots of fun with stuff like this, doing my oil paint class. We got past the monochromatic part that I felt very comfortable with. And now we're doing things I feel less comfortable with. So that does have a skin tone vibe, but because her skin tone is a different color, I think it will be fine. But I am trying to decide if I want just a little more of the orange. I think I have a very specific mental picture of what peach is. I don't know. Let's try that. See how it looks. Do I have a brush that isn't totally beat up? I may not. So that was the original color right there. And I don't know. Maybe it is just too skin tony. I think the problem is actually that it's too light. I may have to abandon this idea because I don't have a really deep pink over here. Let's see. Qantas, what is that? Did I say something about Qantas? Did I mispronounce something? I probably did. Valander, no quans for me until this November, sadly. I said Qantas, that's not what I meant. I probably mispronounced something. But I still need the orange. What other orange do I have? Less good orange. So we stick with this one. I think I'm going to end up with not peach, but I'll hopefully still like the color that I end up with. More of a wine, burgundy or something. Oh, I said contests. I meant to say contests. If any of those conventions that you mentioned have competitions or contests that people can enter their miniatures into, because that's the specific focus of the page that I'm updating, is not just miniature events in general, but contests specifically. I mean, maybe I should add a section for event, like conventions and shows that have other events. Well, I guess there wouldn't be a show, because a show is kind of on the, if you've heard of, on the European side, there's like San Savino, there's another couple big ones. And people just go to show off their miniatures, and then they're assessed for medal placements. And that's how the MSP Open works at ReaperCon. And there are also several, they're more interested in painting historical miniatures. There are several clubs in the United States that hold show events that are similar. Everybody puts their entries out on a table, and we get to look at everything close up and enjoy it. It's super fun. And then they're assessed for a medal placement. Whereas a more traditional contest would be everybody enters categories, and then the judges select the 3 or 5 or whatever number that contest chooses to win. So I call that a podium contest. It's kind of like the Olympics. And then a show, you're kind of being assessed against a standard instead of competing directly with anyone else. So you're competing more against yourself and kind of an ideal standard. And that way, everybody who is involved gets some feedback on how they're doing. Now, most shows, and this is definitely true of the one at ReaperCon, may also have special awards kind of on top of that. So Reaper has a manufacturer award where they hand out the Sophie trophies for the 3 best entries in each of the categories. And then Dark Sword's going to be this year. I think they're doing single miniature diorama. I feel like there's youth. I think youth is the 3rd category. He just announced it. I'm sure if it's not on the MSP Open website yet, check Dark Swords like Facebook group. I think he might have announced it there. So Dark Sword Miniatures on Facebook. And Bombshell Miniatures usually does awards too, and I'm pretty sure I heard them say that they're doing that this year. Who else have we had in the past? I know I'm missing, is it Scale 75? There's another one of and it's a company that usually comes and has a booth too. And then there's, I'm pretty sure I saw somebody say that the GB special awards will be happening again this year. And then Reaper also includes, in addition to the Sophie trophies, there's a special award for like big monsters and mouselings. So entries that feature those. But the contest overall, you don't have to put just Reaper miniatures in. You can put whatever, or one of the other companies that I mentioned. You can make your own. That's what the open category is for. We had some fun stuff last year. There was like a life-size replica blaster or something. I'm sure that it was from a specific property, and I'm just being a space cadet. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was like a Games Workshop blaster. But the person had like made it from scratch. There was like a drinking stein. There was some jewelry. What have we had in the past? There was like one of a kind people who do sculpting in like Fimo and Sculpey and stuff. They'll do little statues and sell them. Like I follow a bunch of people on Instagram who do dragons like that. And we had some of those entered. I think that was last year. We've had like a bas-relief sculpture of a neuron, I think is what Marika did one year. So while the bulk of things are miniatures, there's kind of there's space for miniature adjacent type niftiness in the open category. But that is where to go if you want to kind of show off your sculpting and scratch building and all that kind of stuff. That is the category for that. Things still need to be painted or detailed. I mean, we had like feather covered puppets one year, I think, so you wouldn't paint those, but they were still like colored, not just plain whatever they look like before the person put all the feathers and stuff on, if that makes sense. I'm not sure that today is going to be a top day for me making sense, but I am having fun hanging out with you all in any event. Hopefully it's not too much torture for you. All right, do I love this color? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe one of those colors that you need to get some of the shading and highlighting on and stuff before it starts looking normal. Mini Mad Cat got a finalist pin at Salute this year. Congratulations. Oh, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again. Valander says there's a contest going on this month online called Mecha May, i.e. things like the Cav models. Sir Gambit, I think John sent out 6 mails this morning on MSP. Oh, and that's what I get for not having had time to check my email today. I decided that trying to collect online contests was probably beyond the scope of what I could keep up with. Like, I don't think I'm dialed in enough online. And they're usually, a lot of the information that's in the rest of the article about how contests are conducted and how judging is done and stuff like that, I probably wouldn't apply to all the online contests anyway. So definitely tell us about them. I probably won't add those to my information page. I did consider it, and I just would not be able to put the attention into updating that enough to keep it a useful resource. Because, it's been 2 years since I updated this one. So now my question is, while that's drying, what color would her accessories be? So I did this kind of blue. A more different brown? That's kind of the ongoing struggle in miniature painting, I think. You always need a more different brown. That's when I do my little samples. Well, I'm kind of almost 2/3 of the way to, you could argue that, it's blue-red and I could add yellow. Or you could argue that right now it's a blue-orange complementary scheme. Which I think would be a more compelling argument. What was that other brown I had? No. but I don't know if I want this to be just like a smidge darker. This is I finally found my blue liner that I had lost on the previous 2 episodes. I tucked it away kind of in between something that was on my desk, so I had to clean up a little before I found it, but I was very relieved. I don't even know how to live with a blue liner. Like, what is even the point? I don't think my brown was dark enough, is why I'm adding that. I don't know if I love it. So here's what we can do to make colors get along better. I'll put some on first and we'll see what we think. And I think we're gonna go yuck. Let's find out. Let's see, this bracer is adjacent. And it's like not a big yuck, but it's not a big yum either. But one way to make colors go together better is to put some of one color in the other color. In this case, I think what I want is more of this red. But before that, I will again do the test so we can see if we confirm my idea that if you put one of the one color here, I'll put it on the pouch this time, we feel like it starts going with the other thing a bit better. It is still way too light in value, in my opinion. It's too similar to other things. My cat that's too big to pick up and show you just walked in the room, and he's working on becoming even bigger. We weighed him yesterday, and the news was not great. Now he's 19 pounds, so that's definitely too much for my side back to pick up. But he's just so efficient. It's like he loves to hunt and stuff, but he's mastered how to do it by just sitting there and then having 1 pounce. So he doesn't really, burn up a lot of energy doing his hunting. And then he tries to play the same way. Like, it's really hard to get him engaged enough that he's running around actually getting any exercise. It's just, Jimmy the Brush has been twisting my arm to use Reaper paints more, and I finally caved, and I think I still need more time to let it sink in, that I'm very glad I did. Yeah, I think they're very easy paints to use. The flow improver, I think, is part of the secret. There's different kinds of binder, and I like the one on the Reaper paints better than the ones that have more of a vinyl feel, but that is like a personal preference thing. I don't think that's a quality thing. A lot of times when I see people do reviews of things, it's like, okay, but and I mean anything, like books, movies. We play a lot of board games, so we watch a lot of board game reviews and stuff. There's a difference between telling me what's good and bad about a thing in a more general way and telling me this is good because you like it and it's bad because you don't like it. To me, like, not often, but I have definitely purchased things because of negative reviews, because the person is detailed about what they didn't like, and I'm like, but I do like whatever you said. So I'm okay, or whatever they objected to doesn't matter to me is sometimes the case as well. So I'm okay getting the thing. Am I doing all right keeping her in focus? Let me know in the chat if you feel like the angle isn't as good as last time, or if there's anything else like that. that I should be looking at changing for my new arm. I do think I need to get the second lamp back. I just feel bad for my husband because I also needed that lamp for my oil painting class, which I'm doing down in the basement. So then he had to take the lamp up and down and up and down. I was like, well, that's not very nice of me. Valendra's Red. There was a review I saw recently that said the new reformulated Viejo game color line was literally trying to copy Reaper paints, slightly thinner consistency and higher pigment, organized into triads and quadrads, etc. I haven't looked at them. I looked at I bought, but I haven't looked at yet because I have bad time management skills even when I don't get sick. These things. Because Reaper didn't give me enough colors, so I'm like, all right. They're matte, and that is very attractive to me. And then some of the other properties sounded like things I was either okay with or would enjoy. Okay, I was for a minute I thought I didn't paint under her, knock the shadow out of there, and I just left it gray, and I would definitely want to fix that before doing stuff like putting paint on her boots. But it looks like I was smart enough to address that previously. I admit that I did not love the previous Viejo formulation. It was one of the it felt a bit gooey to me. And I just don't love that feeling on my brush. It doesn't work well for layering. And they weren't uniformly matte. And I have a surprisingly difficult problem with working with non-matte paints. I know there are painters who are much better than I am, in fact, who use different finishes, slight differences in finish to effect. Like if they were doing something like this leather, they'd be looking to use a brown that was a little bit shiny so that it's the paint itself is replicating some of the properties of the material that they're painting. And I think that's really clever and smart. But I just, on something small at least, I have so much trouble judging whether the values are correct. Like whether I've made my shadows dark enough and my highlights high enough, if it's not matte. I've been working on a review of some non-miniature paints. And they're for miniatures, but they're not produced as miniature paints. And they're satin finish, which is, it's not like super terribly shiny. But I was very frustrated using these paints, which I would certainly mention in the review. That is just like, I don't love satin finish. That doesn't mean it's a bad choice or that other people won't be able to work with it. It's just I struggle with knowing whether I've gotten the values correct when I use it, so I would prefer not to use it. Now, I'm happy that I can't reach it, I don't think, but Anne gave us this in the Reaper paint line, and I'm not even aware of an art company that lets you buy this separately. So you can buy like matte medium, but then it's also got like the clear stuff. It's got like medium. So when you add it to your paint, you're making it more transparent. So if you've already got a paint that's a little more transparent than you wanted, you can get rid of the shine, but then you're also making it more transparent and making you have to do more steps. So this stuff is, if I hadn't been working on a review, I would have used this in the paint, but I wanted to use the paint as it was to have the review like not skewing to some other product influencing my opinion. Because like the thing I actually found the most frustrating about these paints, weirdly, was the black and the white. It's like, what? Why are the black and the white not good? Like that. Those are inexpensive pigments that are like in every paint. Why would you make those suck? I think it was the black particularly. Like I could not get colors dark enough I couldn't get colors dark enough if I mixed chromatically. I couldn't get colors dark enough by mixing in black. It's like, well, how do you do like lining or really deep shadows or whatever if you can't get like a really dark color? Zachariah agrees to that approach for reviews. Mini Mad Cat, I mean, from having used the Reaper paints quite a bit in the last few days, I can kind of understand why competitors might decide to try and copy them. And they were for a long time really hard to get in Europe. And I guess since you can get them in the UK now, but then there was Brexit, people in, mainland Europe may still consider Reaper paints too hard or too expensive to get. Whereas Viejo is like right there. I am curious whether the new Viejo, whether they're more consistent, because I really felt like I did a workshop from Fernando Ruiz. He's the person who runs FER Miniatures Company. They do a lot of historical things and busts, but he has some fantasy stuff as well. And he's super fun. If you ever get a chance to take a workshop or a class or something with him, definitely do it. He makes the learning fun as well as, having good skills and knowledge to share, which is good. Like, he makes it fun to help make it more memorable too, I think, is because, when people say unexpected things, it sticks in your memory a little more. So I think that's, probably why he's doing that. But he gave us a list before the workshop of what color paints he would be using, and he works with Viejo. And so I went through and I found some online swatches and stuff, or pictures, not the little digital squares that you'll see on the stores. If you've been here before, you know how I feel like those are like completely useless to understanding what a color actually looks like. But these were like, I found things where people had painted stuff out or they had comparisons or something. It took a lot of searching. I think I did end up making some guesses too. So I brought a whole set of Reaper paints that I thought was pretty equivalent in color. But at the actual event, people were very friendly and nice. And I always feel like it's better when you're doing a tutorial or a workshop or something like that to, if you can, use the same or very similar things to what the instructor is using, so that you're not struggling with other stuff on top of trying to learn whatever they're doing. You don't have to worry about color being a variable or whatever thing being a variable. You're matching everything as close as possible so you can compare. So I was like, okay, it's also been like, I don't know, 10 years or however many years since I've given since I've tried Viejo paints again. It will also be a good opportunity for me to try them again. And I didn't find them as frustrating, but I also didn't enjoy using them. And there were some things. There were a couple of colors. One of the person's colors had actually, the color had shifted somehow over time. And I've never really heard of paints doing this in storage where the color changes. But the bottle that the instructor had and the bottle that this guy had were very different in color. Which was weird. But they had the shininess thing going on too. It was a bust, so it wasn't as problematic, and there were a couple places where I used it. But then after the work, this was those shows that I was talking about that the military focus clubs do. So there's the MMSI, which is it's in Chicago. Do I remember what MMSI stands for? No, I do not. But their show is great. It's usually in October or November, I think. And then Atlanta Military Figure Society does a show in February. That's the one I went to. Tulsa does one at a time of year I do not remember. And they will often have these workshops with a renowned painter for 1 to 3 days before the show. So that I had gone to the workshop in that context, and then I'm like, well, this guy is so close to finished. I'd love to put him in the contest or in the show. And I think we still had the meeting room or whatever for an hour or two. So everybody else left, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna try to finish this guy. It was just some cloth, I think. And I ended up, everyone else left. They took their paints with them, but I was happy to go back to using my Reaper paints for that bit. It was like a little part I had to repaint to get the color exactly the same. So he's cool. I should bring him, I think a year or two ago when I did my pre-MSP show, I think I showed you all some of my miniatures to help talk about like category considerations and give you a chance to learn from my mistakes. Like one of my mistakes was her outfit is confusing me. One of the mistakes I made in an entry was not considering the size of my carrying case prior to completing the entry. So it became very annoying. Military Miniature Society of Illinois. Thank you, Zachariah. Yes, that's the MMSI. And I ended up taking that figure to 4 or 5 different shows and just ripped up the bottom of my carrying case because I had to attach it, I had to take the shelf out and attach it directly to the bottom of the case. So sometimes there's just like goofy things like that you might not have thought about when you're working on a contest entry. It's like, oh, maybe I should measure the height and see if that works with how I normally transport this miniature. We got a lot of paint info here, I think. Valender the Red. I've also found a great use for the red superwash. I thin it even more and use it to add faint reddish tinge to a figure's cheeks and nose and other areas that get a little reddish. If people listening don't have the superwash, because Reaper only sold those last year at ReaperCon, it was kind of a beta test, I guess, maybe. You can do a similar thing with the clears. So there's a magenta clear and a red clear, and you could mix those together. Well, depending on what skin tone you've got, you can use either of them alone or mix them together to get a nice reddish tinge like that. Mini Mad Cat. Funnily enough, one of my viewers did actually say that in today's stream. They're not as hard in my experience, but they're more expensive. Not as hard to find. These are the Viejo paints, I think. The Reaper paints aren't as hard to find anymore, but now they're more expensive. And yeah, it'll be the opposite way here, where I'm sure that Viejo or other stuff from Europe, it's like in the regular paint, the regular art paint world. Schminke is a really highly regarded brand, but their stuff is like super expensive in the States because of the added costs from shipping. So I do not have very many Schminke things, even though I would like to. Valender. My biggest issue with Viejo was how their colors varied between batches more than any other paint. In the course of 3 years, I saw 4 different shades of hull red, for example, ranging from equal to redstone to almost a pure dark red. I have seen more complaints with that than I might have expected, and it does seem like a couple of the colors kind of permanently changed, which will happen probably for reasons that aren't Viejo's fault, because pigments can no longer be available. It's weird if you think about, if you think of all the miniature paint you've ever seen, and you think about, you go into the hobby store like Michael's or something, and all the paint that's there, and then you go in the art store and all the paint that's there. All of those art style paints are less than 1% of the pigment use in the world. So we have zero say on what colors are available. Toyota and other big manufacturers decide which pigments stay in production. So if those big companies aren't buying pigments enough, or they're too expensive or too hard to make or whatever, they just go away. And that did happen recently. There was a yellowy orange that got discontinued, I want to say 10 years ago. And then there was another orange that got discontinued 6 months ago. So it's entirely possible that they had paints, because they're more of a paint company than most of the other people making miniature paint, like they do sell paint for animators. They have like all these other kinds of paint lines that have nothing to do with us. They may use a wider, a broader base of pigments than a lot of the miniature paint companies, and they're more likely to use these less typical. Like it's super unlikely that any pigment that Reaper uses would go into production. It's like phthalo and other, thingy magenta. I think it's PR 122. These are like super prominent, common colors. They're great colors. They're light fast. They mix well. They're not going anywhere. But it's possible that Viejo. Well, and even Reapers had color changes because of the thing you mix the paint into, the base, the medium mix. That can change too, and there were a few Reaper colors that changed because of that, I think. I do not remember off the top of my head what those were. Babatuk 4. I got a few of the old Game Color, and wow, those were discontinued for recent. Yeah, those were some of the ones I had, like when I first started painting, and they were so shiny. Like it was like plastic. It was like painting with plastic. I just did not care for it. They were beautiful colors, but the experience was not for me. But yeah, I believe they completely reformulated that line as well as the model color. I think that's the. Now I don't think they changed air color. Oh, that was actually. I thought that was a mold line, and it was like a little piece of lint or something. I liked I have to replace some of them because when I got sloppy with my paint maintenance routine, and I skipped a year or two, and I had some metallics go bad. The metallics are most likely to do that. I in no way hold this against Viejo. I had a few Reaper ones go bad as well. And I'd like to replace those. So I'm hoping that their air color metallics aren't too wildly changed. There was this like super weird, I think they called it bronze, but it was like this really pale, pinky, purpley color. It was, I don't know, it was just very cool. It was like not something that I'd use every other minute, but it was a neat color, and I'd like to have it back. And there was a couple of the silver colors that I would like to have back as well. Because, I paint metallics so often with my love of shiny things. I mean, I enjoy painting metallics. It's not quite the same because if you use like the shaded metallic style painting, you're using matte paint on the parts you don't want to be shiny, so then it becomes easier to figure out whether something is reflective because you want it to be or not. Bender. That was still better than the very first 1989 or so run of Citadel paint that dried almost rubbery like latex. Yeah, there's a real, everything we call acrylic paint, there's actually like a wider variance of what that actual acrylic thing is. Like I think there's some of them are vinyl or PVA or other things. They're not true acrylic. Babatuk. The new colors actually look even better from the few I have and much more workable. Valander. The reviewer did not like the metallics. For some reason, the metallics were all airbrush level thinned and had mediocre coverage and were nearly impossible to dry brush with, as an example. The metallics that I used from Viejo were in their airbrush line. I think it's just called Air. Viejo Air. So I didn't actually have either the game color or anything from the model paint line. I remember way back in the day, if you've been painting a minute and you used to be online, you will recognize when everyone went nuts about Viejo smoke. It was like this weird glazy sort of thing, and it had actual like little particles in it. And then Anne mixed a color that was like the same color, but it didn't have the little particles in it, and that actually was more useful to me. Do I remember off the top of my head what that color is? It's not this, it's the other one in the it's the darker color in this triad. So 201, I guess it's 9201. Let's see if anyone finds that in the chat. Sagebrush C asks if I'm washing or wet blending. Right now I'm actually just getting a coat of color on because both of the colors that I'm using are a little, like, they're not one coat colors. And even if I'm doing wet blending, I like to have like a solid opaque foundation. Or you do it twice. So if this were a bigger surface, like on this guy, I went, like, the base coat was wet blending. And I just did it twice where I had to. These colors have a lot of white, so I didn't have to a lot. So mostly I just did more because I was fiddling. But for if I was going to try and wet blend these little folds, which I wouldn't because I would just prefer to layer those. That's how I'm going to do those. I would still go in and have that opaque base coat probably. Or I would do it twice, like, or 3 times. 9199 russet brown. Yes, russet brown is very similar to the color that the old Viejo Smoke was without the little... I mean, there were effects that having the little particles in might have been cool, but one of the things I liked it for was, like, as a shadow color for old bone or parchment or stuff like that. I like I typically like more of a browny sepia type of old bone than a, like, gray one. I don't know why. I just do. Or ivory, I guess we would say. It's nice to, like, sometimes do the other color depending on a color scheme, but I just mean from a pure painting a color because I like it point of view. I tend to go with more of a yellowy brown. I'm also trying to do some dark lining as I go because it seems like I did not do that when I painted the blue parts or the wood parts. And this is also allowing me to kind of check my colors because I did not go into this with, like, a very firm color plan. My color plan was kind of, I feel like, painting this sort of peach. And then I was like, well, now I have to find brown colors for the accessories that are going to go with that. So I started testing this brown here, which started out looking quite different. I'm working with a limited set of colors. If I do make a color plan in advance, which I do sometimes when I paint here, I'll pull out the colors and have them ready to go. And occasionally I'll have to mix something or get another color. But when I'm not working on a specific color scheme, I use the paints that come with the... So Reaper has 2 Learn to Paint kits, Core Skills, and Level Up. And then each of those has an expansion set of paints. And I've got that as a little kit that I keep beside me when I'm doing the show. So my assumption is that a decent number of viewers probably have at least some of those products, so that I'll be demonstrating with colors that people are more likely to have than discontinued colors or special edition colors, or the colors that I am attracted to if allowed to select from my entire shelf of 800 paints. So since I didn't have a specific color scheme in mind for this figure, I've been painting her using that set of paints. The skin and the hair and the armor were painted some time ago. I tend to bounce around. If you prefer to watch someone who, paints figures from beginning to end over a more concentrated span of time, and show in the morning, I think it starts at 11:30 Central, which is kind of, since this is a Texas-based channel, I guess we'll do stuff in Central. She doesn't work on the same figure day after day until she finishes it, but she has like a set of figures in rotation that she goes through and paints from beginning to end. And sometimes I won't even, paint a whole figure on here. Like this one started, there were a couple other figures where I was just talking about how I paint hair, and she was an interesting challenge because I'm not great at painting curly hair, so I wanted to kind of see what we could figure out for that. And I might have left her, or I might finish her up. Like apparently people like that I'm random and don't do the same thing all the time, so that all the Reaper shows aren't the same, I guess. I mean, not that everything would be the same. Just having a different person doing things is more than enough to make something different from something else. If you all have changed your minds on that and you would prefer that I actually, have an attention span and paint something to start to finish, feel free to let me know in the comments or private message, because I'm very open to feedback. I've had a few weeks lately where I've kind of felt like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do on the show. And today it was definitely like that because I'd been sick and just trying to get back into the life, I guess, back into reality. All right. I turned down the brightness, and now I'm not sure if I turned it down too much. I think I might have calibrated it on Rocky, who has a lot of white and light going on. But yeah, I fiddled with the color a little too. It's not exactly what I see, but it's a lot closer to what I see than it was when I was using this camera. I have no ambitions of attempting to make a 100% color corrected video because I'm not sure that anyone has ever done that, so why would I be the first person to pull it off? But I thought it would be nice to try and get something that was a little closer. So I was pondering what to do today, and I saw this lady sitting on my shelf, and I was just like, I feel like you need more paint. I feel bad that you don't have more paint. Quindy has shared the link to the Learn to Paint Kits if you weren't sure what I was talking about, and Babatuk and Sakurai I am are both down with my randomness. Which, I mean, let's all be super shocked to discover that I was diagnosed with ADHD last year. It's like my whole life makes sense now. No, that's going to be blue. I should have done that blue already, but I will enjoy a technical challenge or fix it and paint it blue in a minute. Does anyone remember what blue I painted that? No. We'll find out. It'll be a mystery. Is there anything else that should be this brown? I want her belt to be blue, I think. Blue leather is totally a thing. But yeah, we're gonna worry about that little pouch later too. The minis that I paint when I figure it all out in advance are better, but this is how I paint a lot of the time. The figure it out as I go approach, as I'm sure that many other people do too. So that is why I figure it's okay to keep doing that. We can talk about how to work stuff out together, which is definitely something I like to emphasize on the show. That was the whole idea of the Beyond the Kit when I picked that name. And because, when I was going to start doing this, Justin's like, okay, well, give me a name and your idea of, some 3 or 4 ideas for what you would do for shows. And I thought about it for a long time because I'm really bad at naming things. And then I was like, came up with the name Beyond the Kit, and I liked that. And then I thought about all the things that I couldn't put in the kit, because it's printing space, it's limited. I think I already went much longer than Ron had originally hoped, because that is what I do. I never had a problem with the whole, your essay has to be at least blah words long. That was never my problem. My problem was the other way. It was like, oh, I've hit the max limit. I need to cut out some blathering. So my idea was talking about all the stuff that I couldn't fit in there, and that, in the same thing, even when we do classes at ReaperCon or whatever, I mean, I've taught classes at miniature conventions for a lot of years, and you only have like 2 hours, and people want to have time to paint and stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff you don't get to talk about, or you don't get to talk about in as much depth as you might want to. Now I am layering, because that is primarily what I do. I do some wet blending. And we've done some dry brushing and washing experiments here, but I admittedly do not use those techniques like a ton personally. I've actually been using them more since we did the experiments, because there's all the fun new kinds of brushes that I did not know. I got a new one on the weekend, because you know how I am. I'm always there to buy a brush, so you guys don't have to. I went to the art store to get some brushes for my oil painting class. Hilariously, brushes that are as small as I would use for miniature painting, but filberts instead of rounds. When he does the detail work, he uses filbert sable brushes. And I'm painting like a 12 by 16 inch canvas, I think, when then you're in there in these little tiny spots. Anyway, I saw this from Princeton. Now, it's more expensive than a lot of the other options, but since different people have access to different things, I thought it'd be worth me grabbing it and trying it. This is a makeup brush example. I don't know if I love the cut of the brush. You see, it's not quite as dome. It's a little pointier. And then these ones are from Army Painter. There's a company called Artist Opus. In England, that put out a set of these. I'm pretty sure that this company makes the brushes for them, but I don't know for sure. But I ordered some rosemary and company ones to have the different sizes, but then Army Painter has a set of 3 that's like $20, so it's cheaper than getting just one of these. But this was kind of in between these other sizes, I guess, and it's nice to have a small one. I want to experiment some more with pattern cloth for that. I don't think it would fit this figure, because she's got a lot of texture already with this scale mail, and then there's texture there, so having a surface that's not textured is actually going to be providing more visual variety than if I tried to give her like a cloth weave texture. I think you want to give people's eyes a place to rest. You don't want to have everything like covered in freehand or texture or whatever, is my experience at any rate. There are always exceptions to those kinds of, it's not really art rules, it's like guidelines to help us get frustrated less often. There's always ways to do the things that people say don't do. But it's also nice to have guidelines to fall back on, so you don't make yourself crazy figuring everything out from scratch every time, is what I figure at any rate. This is one of the henchmen and women. And here I'm going to blame this on being sick, but I do not at the moment remember whether all of the hench people come in one pack, or if there's like one pack in the retail version. I mean, one pack for the female hench people and one pack for the males. I think they're all in one big box set now. in the retail version. But if you got them in the Kickstarter, it was, there was a pack of guys and a pack of gals. And she is from the pack of gals. She is one of my favorites. From that, they're all, I mean, they're exactly the kind of character that Bobby Jackson loves to sculpt. And he had a great time doing them, and it shows. I think they all have a lot of personality. They all would be great additions to a role-playing game if your characters make use of hench people. It'd be easy to give them personalities and feelings about how crummy the adventurers treat them. I'm doing my shadows first. I typically love to do my shadows first. Maybe that's why I like this oil painting guy, because he does the shadows first. What we do, like just all just all the shadows are one color. You're just doing the shapes, and then we come back in with like just one color of light. Sometimes if something's like massively different in value, he'll mix it up. It's kind of like no tan is a method of doing it where you're just kind of breaking everything down into light and dark. And I have done this on miniatures. I'm trying to remember. Not as strict. I mean, I don't feel like I can be as strict with, you know, just all of the shadows and all of the lights on a miniature. I just can't conceptualize that on a miniature as well. I mean, I think it'd be a good exercise if I could, but I can't. But I will use, like, just shades of gray and stuff to kind of block in the values on a miniature. And I've got several articles on my website with examples of that, and I don't remember any specific ones other than Barglemore and Camille. I think it's like a zombie maid and a zombie butler. And I did those like all in black and white first and then put color over them. Which is funny because they're largely black and white because the traditional maid's outfit and butler's outfit are black, white, and gray. But it's interesting because you can look at it and you see they're like totally different black, white, and gray than the ones I used. I used brush on primer just to kind of block everything in. They are all in the hench people are all in the same box set now. Kurtz didn't like his artist opus, like one of these ones, or they have like sable brushes too, I think. Like this kind. Let's see. Zachariah has the hench people both ways. You got them in the Kickstarter and then another pack when they all come out. You need a lot of hench people in your game, huh? Quindy's trying to do math. I don't envy Quindy. Why? Why are you trying to do math? Chris got the small sable. I have not tried. You know, I think I have some of their sable brushes somewhere, but I haven't tried it. I have a brush problem, people. I'm not going to lie. Like, if anyone wants to try to guess how many brushes are not on camera at the moment, I will show you. It'll be like the jelly beans. If somebody wants to make some guesses at how many. So these are just the brushes in my immediate environment that I could reach with my arms. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, all of the brushes that I actually have. I will embarrass myself and show you if anyone wants to put guesses in the chat. Despite having a wet palette, my paint is drying up a little, which is non-optimal for layering. I really feel like it doesn't do this as much when I'm not on camera either. I don't know what's up with that. If I want to make this lighter, there is an interesting puzzle Oh, y'all are adorable. Because you want to talk about doing math. I'll give it a few more minutes for someone to put in a guess, and then I will start grabbing brushes. They're talking about mold lines I didn't fix. I'm going to have to make that look like a rip or something, I think. Because she's too fun not to finish. We were watching my husband got the, well, not DVD because he doesn't buy DVDs, he buys everything electronically, but he bought the D&D movie when it came out, so we were watching all the special features. And there's some interesting stuff about that. They did a lot of practical effects, so there's some like cool behind the scenes footage of, you know, how they did the undead guys and the Dragonborn, which if there is a sequel, they have to put a Dragonborn in as a major character. Like, they did a really cool job with those. The Tabaxi was a little not quite as awesome. The Eriko was pretty good. There was more than one Dragonborn, actually. Some of them are kind of in the background. And then just what the poor actor who did the Eriko had to go through was interesting to hear more about that. But I was kind of sad that there wasn't, none of the features really talk about the costuming a lot, and I would have been interested to know more about that. Valander, like, Tabaxi was the biggest complaint I heard. Curse 13 can just walk down the street if he needs a new brush. You have like a brush store or a brush factory, or what is this awesome opportunity of just walking down the street and getting more brushes? All right, I'm just gonna finish with this level of highlights, and then I will reveal the truth and face the scorn of my side brush addiction. I really need to Marie Kondo my brushes too, because there are some that it's not entirely clear why I have them. Like, if I don't like them, perhaps I should stop having them. But yeah, taking up other art media was maybe not something I needed to do, because then that's just an excuse to buy more brushes, because the brushes in my vicinity are just my miniature painting acrylic brushes. It's not my oil brushes or my watercolor brushes, because you don't want to mix those up. Like, that's not me being a brush prima donna. You really, if you use a brush for oils, because I know a lot of people who are doing oils on miniatures now, you want, that brush is just for oil. After that, it has literally got oil in it. You can never get all the oil out. It's not going to be good to use when you're painting acrylic paints. And likewise, acrylic paints, as we all know, are very mean to brushes. So you don't want to use like your super nice watercolor brushes for acrylics if you want them to stay super nice. Like, I just accept that I have to buy these every few years. I'm not buying another size 8 watercolor brush. Curse lives in downtown Toronto and has museums, a couple game stores, and half a dozen art stores within a couple blocks of my apartment. Well, I may not be Curse's friend anymore, because I used to live in Toronto and now I don't, and I'm very sad and I miss it. All right, so these are brushes that I've had out to use on the show like 3 months ago. They stayed there. So I don't know if anyone wants to like try to count as I do these, because I don't have an actual count. I'm just going to be showing you brushes. And then the brushes I've been using today were part of that pile, but were not included when I held it up. And then, well, this one was the Halloween brush that I showed you guys. In case anyone missed that, moths will eat natural hair brushes, so be mindful of that if you pack them away. This is a crappy brush, so this is not actually a tragic story. This was kind of my, everyday miniature painting brushes. So there's like one of the, this is not the same as though, this is bristle brush. There was a set of these that I bought when we were doing those dry brush tests to test stuff. This, it should go back in the watercolor pile, so don't count this brush against me. This one brush, don't count. It is super stiff. In watercolor, you can use it to kind of scratch the paint off, but it is so stiff that I'm not sure. I mean, I might test it on a miniature I didn't care about, but it might be so stiff that it would actually scrape paint off instead of just, making a cool texture. All right, any brushes other brushes with a story here. No, like some of the, I bought this one, a couple other ones. When I see small synthetic sables at the art store, I will sometimes pick them up to test. But a synthetic brush that doesn't do the hooky tip is unicorn. That does not exist. So, but I know people want it. And then this is when I was doing those dry brushing tests. I gathered. These were the brushes I bought or gathered. So this is like the bigger size of that. And these all came. All of these ones with that color handle came in a makeup set, and that was like $12. So I don't feel bad about those. I wouldn't have bought those if it wasn't for the dry brush tests. This a friend gave me, so I didn't buy that either. This is like one of the first brushes I bought when I started painting miniatures, actually. I was painting a dragon, and I needed bigger brushes, and they didn't have... I guess I couldn't find short-handled flats at the art store. I'm sure they had them. Our art store is like enormous and has a ton of stuff, but I was a dummy at the time, so I didn't get the right thing. And then this is kind of like the backup miniature brush thing. Yeah, I don't have an explanation for this story either. I bought a few new Windsor Nude recently, so that one just is waiting for when I need it. This is one of the first brushes I bought when I was miniature painting too. It is like no longer functional for nice things, but pokey terrain type things. It's great. Yes, so that's the ones that are like around me. We're at roughly 60 now. Terrain stippling brush, that one. Hey, David Weir. Zachariah says, around 100 if my counting is accurate-ish. I'm sure it's more accurate than mine. There's like a small... Alright, we're going to say there's like another 25 or 30 back there. The rest of the makeup set, and then other brushes that I bought a long time ago that I... And they're in this like fancy ring thing where like it organizes brushes, and apparently organization did not appeal to me because like I never used that thing. I prefer the cups, but I need a system because I need, Quinny says she thinks it's closer to 125. Okay, well, hopefully my husband cannot hear this conversation. I need a system for marking like the different stages of my actual sable brushes that I use a lot. Because I don't, once they stop having a nice tip, they're not useless. They're just not going to be good for X task. So they get downgraded, like for metallics or whatever. Terrain. Well, by terrain, I mean base textures, because like I paint so much terrain. I should, though. I have some set aside. I actually thought about that for today. I went and looked at my little box of terrainy type stuff. But I think everything looked like it needed assembled or something. So I gave up that notion. Will I be teaching at ReaperCon this year? No Time for Bull asks. Yes, I will be teaching 2 classes on the topic of monochromatic painting, which if you were watching the show around Halloween, I painted the vampire guy in black and white. And I think that's the figure I'm going to pick for the class as well. But it will also, like, I'll talk about, like painting bluish monochromatic for ghosts. I had in the Halloween before, I did do kind of a bluish ghost character, or sepia tone for like Victorian or Western type characters. So monochromatic isn't just black and white, but I have paints that are mixed up that are black and white, so it's easy to use in the class, and we don't have to waste a lot of time mixing paint. So I usually do black and white in the class so that we can spend more time painting. And one of the reasons I like to do that class is, it's, if you think about it in terms of you want to paint a vampire or Western character, or what was the other example? Ghosts. Those are very specific use cases that maybe you're not painting every 5 minutes. But I was just talking about how I did a value block in with black and white primer. And I was doing that for a while when I was working on doing more directional lighting and pushing contrast. That was a very useful tool for those tasks. So kind of the bonus benefit you get, there's several bonus benefits you get practicing monochromatic painting, actually. Because it also pushes you to work on texture. Because if you don't have color to say this is blonde hair and this is leather and this is wood or whatever, how are you conveying that information to the viewer? Texture is a really great way to do it. So painting in a monochromatic color scheme pushes you to do that because you don't have color to rely on anymore. It also takes a bunch of tricks out of my bag that how I like doing glazes to color tone things, or stuff like putting that little blush in the cheeks like Valander was talking about earlier. You have none of that, alas, when you're working in monochromatic, because if you put a glaze of gray over a gray cheek, you're not creating more depth of like skin's kind of transparent, so when you do glazes over it, it kind of creates this depth, but that doesn't work in monochromatic. So you're not just losing the color shift, you're losing kind of a couple other things we do. But putting constraints on your painting can help you. I mean, it can make you more creative in a way, because it's like when somebody says, what did you do on your summer vacation, or what's your favorite book? Like, for some of us, the answer is just going to be an open mouth stare, because it's like, well, like everything, like there's too many options. How do you narrow it down? Whereas if you say, what's your favorite fantasy book, maybe that becomes like a little more of an answerable question. And it's a similar thing with painting. If you do something like the quarterly contest where everybody's painting the same miniature, that's a constraint. Everybody's painting the same miniature. You can't just go, okay, well, I really love painting orcs or whatever. If it's not an orc this time, well, then you don't get to paint an orc. You have to paint what everybody else is painting and figure out how to do it in a way that you enjoy and that you think people will enjoy looking at and vote for. So I think that it's good to do stuff now and then, like paint a miniature monochromatically, or when it was the online ReaperCon, there were a couple years there was like virtual ReaperCon, and then there was like virtual expo or something. At least one of those years, I think actually both of those years, there was quad color challenge where you only had 4 colors, and I think that some of the what's the painting thing on the Discord that everybody does? Help me out. You're like kind of pushing yourself to get stuff finished, so there'll be like little units or whatever challenges that you get points for. Reaper Challenge League. There we go. The Reaper Challenge League. I think that's one of the things you do in the Reaper Challenge League, isn't it? Isn't there still like a limited color challenge? And I've always found that an interesting Like even back when I really hated mixing color, because you may not believe it now. I mean, maybe you will, because I have bitched about it before, I think. But I did not start doing this knowing anything about color. I mean, I'd taken art in high school and everything, but I have no memory of if we talked about color mixing. I suspect Mr. Urenko would have at least mentioned it, but I have no memory of these events, or so. So I didn't come into this being like super knowledgeable or confident about color by any stretch of the imagination. I started off being pretty good at blending. Like, I won't say that I struggled with that. I actually had less problems with the concept of that than with dry brushing and washing. So I kind of like gave up on dry brushing and washing for years and then circled back around to it. Weirdly enough. I'm debating whether that needs brighter highlights. I feel like no, that it does not, because I don't want to compete. You know, she has a very dark skin tone, so I don't want to make something that's too bright and vivid. I'm going to come back, I think, to her skin in some way or another. But I think this is a good level for the cloth. There's some parts that look a little patchier on the camera than they do to me. I'll just see if I can smooth those out a little. But I think I'll call that good. Zachariah M. loves my limited palette work. It's kind of fun. Valander says, yeah, the limited palette is easy mode. It's 3 colors plus a black and a white. Yeah, the first quad color was not. It was, you had 4 pots of paint. And yeah, you can't mix every color with either, you know, cyan, magenta, yellow, or red, yellow, blue, plus black and white. But you can sure mix a heck of a lot of colors with either of those 3 colors plus black and white. So yeah, I agree. I would cut out black at the very least if I were doing it, so that you would have to mix chromatic dark colors. Working without white and acrylic paint is like, because I did that on my quad color guy. I think I used a color like, that was the lightest color I used, and it was not light enough. Because I also didn't use the black. Because I had like red, magenta red or something. Forest green. It wasn't, might have been this color actually. Or the other one. There's like 2 bones leather colors that I love them both, but I get them mixed up in my head. So I can't remember what the other one was called, but I think it's the other one. And then like a creamy color, and the creamy color was dumb. I should have just done white, because I think if I'd mixed the brown with the white, I'd have got something close to the creamy color, and I would have been able to get enough contrast on that guy, because I couldn't go quite dark enough or quite light enough to get enough contrast on him. But that's okay. Oh, I'm not sure if I said, for people watching this later in the restream or on YouTube, that Quindy's guess was that I showed off 125 excessive paintbrushes. Valander, my back is killing me. I bent over to put something in a drawer beside me and suddenly found a cat in my face licking my nose. Of course, you don't stop a cat when she's feeling affectionate, especially an 18-year-old kitty, so I stayed bent over for far longer than was good for my back. Oh, would Kitty not have let you pick her up so you could hold her while she licked your nose? Zachariah, I've got a fellow at our paint club doing monochromatic non-metallic metal so he can pick a color with a glaze later. Yes, I do. I like doing that for NMM a lot too. Like, I'll just use straight grays and then decide later, you know, how I'm shifting it or what I'm putting in the shadows or something. Because I kind of like to look at what else I did on the figure and then factor that in. But occasionally, like if I really want a warmer or slightly different non-metallic look, which I guess it's still monochromatic, I pick instead of these grays, like all the weather named ones, these are like the pure neutral grays in the Reaper line. But there's like stone gray and weathered stone and shadowed stone, I think, and they're like warmer grays And I will occasionally do non-metallic metal with those. I'm not sure if I gave the vest a second coat. The other reason I like to do the second coat is, I mean, it's partly for coverage, but it's also, and again, my apologies, if you've been here before and you've heard me ramble on about paint film, we were talking about all the different, you know, more vinyl-based paints or more acrylic paint paints or whatever, but that thing that you're talking about is what holds the color, you know, the little particles, like pigment is actually little particles, and the binder is what holds it together and then what attaches it to your surface. So I like to have a nice, you know, solid application of paint so that if I am scrubbing over it, doing dry brushing, or, you know, if I made an error and I got some of that peach color on the shield, because I painted this like months ago, so it's definitely dry, I could get kind of a scrubby brush and I'd probably be able to get it off without damaging the underlying surface. So as long as the surface has had a day or two to dry, you can usually, sometimes even if it hasn't, you can get away with the scrubby thing. Even though I'm not always painting gaming miniatures, I do want them, you know, I want to be able to travel with them. I want people to be able to pick them up and look at them. I want to not have to feel like I have to treat them like fine china. They are meant to be looked at and appreciated, and I am kind of a spaz. Well, actually, that is not a very appropriate way to say that anymore. I am a clumsy person. So I like to make my paint job pretty sturdy. So I always wash the miniature, even if it's one that I don't feel needs primer. Like this, I did not prime this. This is Bones Black. And then I try to, if it does need primer, I do primer. And even if it needs primer or it doesn't need primer, I do the thing where I put on a solid coat, whether I'm getting it on through wet blending or just multiple coats or whatever I'm doing. Before I start doing like washes or layering or anything where I'm messing with that underlying surface, I want to have a good solid application of paint on there. Oop, I think I'm going a little over to the left. I'm used to, I don't know, working more on the left, and then I forget the camera's like here, not in the middle of the device. Hopefully we're all liking this stance so far. I'm excited that I haven't jostled it and hit my head against it 14 times. And it will be nice because it's on like a big round base, and I can just pick it up and move it if I need to not have something on my desk, but then it should be retain the correct position so that next week I can come back and not have to fiddle with it 1,000 times to get the focus and everything right for you all to see what I'm doing. So I'm hopeful that this is definitely an upgrade. Backpack. I knew I was doing that thing where you forget stuff. Oh, what's Quindy telling us? Oh, Quindy said there were too many complaints about the limited color being too hard when they didn't allow black and white. Well, maybe there should be like a, you know, what do they call that in video games? Like death mode or something. Hardcore mode. There should be like that one, but then there should also be hardcore mode. Valander took advantage of a weird chemistry thing that Anne taught us. Clear magenta plus clear phthalo green equals purple. Yes, that's what I was essentially doing that with my choices. I just wanted things that were less transparent. So forest green plus the red magenta. I can't remember. It's the closest thing to a true magenta in the main line. There's like pale magenta and then the mid-tone, and then I think burgundy wine is the shadow. So I use the mid-tone color and then the forest green, because both those just have a little more coverage, but they're still going to do that weird, almost black, purpley, cool color, which I love. Like, I would totally do a monochromatic thing in that color. Like I've done it in watercolor and stuff, because you work the transparency to your advantage. Then it's just more transparent stuff looks lighter in color, and less transparent stuff, you go over it more coats, it looks darker. So that's how you kind of get it instead of white. And I love that color combination. Val under the red. One of these days I'll learn how to do non-metallic metal chainmail. It's too tiny to do non-metallic metal on every link, and just dry brushing gray over black looks rather dull. You kind of got to pick spots. Like if you see that there's more light here, so it's like you do your dry brushing, you pick spots where it's like curved or something, and you take it up higher, and then you have other spots where you don't go as high. So you can still do the dry brushing, or I did side brushing, I think, for this. But you're not being uniform on the surface. You're thinking about where the light is going to be brighter or not. I feel like I did that on something I painted here, but I haven't painted anything. Like, she's probably got the biggest area of not flat, non-metallic metal that I've done. So I might have to look for a character with more. Is there like can anyone think of characters where there's like a large area of chainmail on it, where it's not like just, under just a little strip under an outfit or something? Because now I'm thinking about it, I'm not coming up with anything off the top of my head. The elder kitty loves it when I pick her up, but she curls up like a baby and goes to sleep when I do, so she'll stop licking my nose. Something like 95% of commercially available mediums are actually medium binder, which is why Winsor Newton medium behaves slightly different than Liquitex, just for example. Yes, medium is binder. It just may also have additives. So airbrush medium will typically have slow dry and drying retarder in it, so that in hopes of having your airbrush needle not get dry tip immediately. Matte, if you get a matte medium, it's got matting agent in it. You can usually piece out what they put in there. If you read the label or the description online, you can figure out it's got this, and this. Where I prefer, if I want flow improver, I just want flow improver. If I want medium, I do want the matting agent in it. I just want matte medium. If I want drying retarder, I want to know that it's in there. But yes, violet red, that's the color. Violet red and forest green, you'll get a similar color. And if anyone's interested in the community contest, which is the one where everyone's painting the same miniature. So the Challenge League is on the Discord for those who aren't reading the chat right now. The Challenge League is on the Reaper Miniatures Discord, and that's like a way to push yourself to paint miniatures that you want to get painted, get through your backlog. The quarterly community contest is on a specific link. How do we get to that link if we're not looking at the chat, Quindy? Do you know? Is there like a place? Is it on the website somewhere or something? So for the benefit of people watching this on YouTube later, it's not on Facebook now, although I'm sure the link is posted on Facebook. Everybody paints the same miniature, and then the pictures get posted and voted on, and the person who wins... Oh, look, I did that. Getting a glue ball on there. The person who wins picks the miniature for the next quarter. All right, I'm looking for a scrubby brush. Not that super scrubby one I mentioned, because that's too scrubby. Let's try this one. Nope, there it is. So this is a old flat or slanted brush that I cut off so that it is a little stiffer. And I got a brown boo-boo there. So before I see whether I have to repaint it, I'm going to try and scrub it off. And even though that paint is freshly applied, if I, use kind of a light hand, and I did mine as 2 coats underneath, I was able to get that off, even though I surely did that before all the talking, since I haven't been painting. Quindy says the link to the Reaper Challenge League should be on any of Reaper's socials that John shares it everywhere. Oh no, this is scale mail. But I would approach it chainmail in a similar way, where I'm picking areas that, like this is a curve, so I would put more light here, Unfortunately, the rest of this is not a good example because it's like just a column, so I basically just randomly pick some places where if it was somebody's elbow or something, there'd be other places. But I'm trying to think if there is a Reaper figure that has a lot of chainmail that I could grab one of and do that as a demonstration at some point. And I'm blanking at the moment, but blanking is kind of my deal. I will try to remember to check with the search engine. I love the search engine on the Reaper site. I mean, I usually will search like a few different terms because I think whoever has the misfortune of having to keep up the terms is pretty good, but sometimes something gets missed. And if I find something that really obvious that I feel like a figure should have come up in a search term and it didn't, I usually tell Ron so he can fix it. Ron probably wishes I would not do that. But that is who I am. He's very patient with me. That's why he's such a good art director, because he's very patient with all our crazy artist nonsense. This darker color here. I don't think I did. I'm not going to worry about those rivets right now. I'll come back when I paint the rivets. I'll start by painting them black and then do the shiny part. So that's why I'm not worried about going around them. That is the great thing about acrylic paint, is that it paints over itself really well, which is why we should not get stressed out about making mistakes. That mistake I just made, if I had not been able to scrub it off, so what? I just would have got this paint here. I'd mix it again if I had to. I would paint over it. I should have left that there, actually. She can have a little scratch on her boots. That was more of a Bob Ross happy accident kind of deal. I, for some reason, like to make the soles of boots a different color sometimes than the tops. I am not a cobbler, so I do not know what we call all the parts. But I figure, you know, you might use a thicker leather or something, and it wouldn't look exactly the same. Since I don't think these people are buying, you know, fancy Italian shoes. That would be very impractical for adventuring. It'd be a terrible choice. The link on the website still leads to the previous Reaper Challenge, and Kundi will ask John to update that. Ballinger the Red. The Tray Manor orcs, the ones that look like the one in the LTBK, often have large waistcloths or skirts of mail. That is true. The guy I put in there doesn't have much, but there are some other ones that do. I will have to see if I have any of those guys lying around. I'm trying to decide if I want to go a little darker in the shadows of the brown, and I feel like I do. That is not blue liner. This is a great color, but it is not going to make anything darker than what I already had. But brown liner is potent, so I will keep some water. Zachariah is suggesting 3384 Ingrid and 2804 Plague Harbinger. Plague Harbinger. Ingrid. Not Ingrid the gnome, then? Is there a different Ingrid? Because Ingrid the gnome has ringmail? I'm not sure what I'd call her armor. She's also very small for a streaming example. Well, I hope with the new camera setup that it's not... You can see the regular scale people a little better than you used to. I'll just use that color as the highlight on the boot soles. Other. This Ingrid looks like a... Oh, okay, I think I know which one. I think I know which one you mean. Okay, this is where I started with this brown, and that is even lighter than I remember it being. So we may do an in-between. 2394 Thorvald the Black. Oh, I'm not remembering that one off the top of my head either. Thank you for all these suggestions. I'm going to go look some up after the show. I'll probably have to order. No, do I have something even smaller? Let's kind of try to do a little bit of a weathered looking armor. Some she works. She is not standing around looking pretty like some of those adventurers. I very often play characters that attempt to stand behind other characters when it's time for combat. Not getting hit is usually a big part of my character's agenda. I do not always succeed. Sometimes the GM remembers that I'm skulking. Or like one time when we were playing Reaper Errant and a flail snail materialized right beside me. That was not a great day for me. That was a very painful day. I had regret. I alas have no news on whether we will be resuming Reaper Errant any time soon. I wish I did have news because I miss hanging out and being ridiculous with my friends. You know what, let's do this a slightly different way. Yeah, who cares it's pink? We'll use the pink. I'm gonna make it messy and then come back with that slightly more transparent color. I do love this color, but it's a little... Because it's got yellow, it's a little translucent. So it can be not translucent, but you know, it's not super opaque. So it can be frustrating to do things like leather damage where you need the opacity to make marks, basically. But it also means that I can do a sloppy version of this, an extra sloppy version of this, and then come back over it with that color. I'll get the color back, and I'll hopefully make the marks look more natural and less like something somebody painted on. Did the backpack? I think it's just your boots now. I like to give people pretty worn toes because I definitely find that happening on my own leather shoes, which I'm very lazy about and never shine. So you definitely will get scuffed up toes in that scenario. Sorry, I guess I started concentrating, and I didn't really address these little straps. Maybe I can get away with just putting a dark line around them, and they'll look okay. I don't want to go that light back there. Not that worried about the shadows. We tend not to see texture and details like that in the shadows. And where did that? Straight blue liner might be a little much for the other side of the scratches. So me putting the brush on my thumb just there was not for the amount of paint on it, although the amount of paint you have on something is definitely gonna make something like this easier or harder to do. But just there, I knew I'd already got the paint off that I needed to. But I could see that the brush wasn't, fully pointed and round. It was kind of, spatulate a little, which is useful for some things. When I was talking about, side brushing chainmail or something, that kind of spatula effect can work well for that, but it's not what I would have wanted for this. Looking for one of these little things. Just do a little bit of like general wear and tear. Because I find that when I attempt to be random, and this is, the human brain is just bad at being totally random. So using a tool like a brush that's going to make you be random can help for some things. It's very easy to get overly symmetrical or patterny or something. Put stuff too evenly applied. So now I'm going back. Nope, that's harvest brown. And that's not what I started with. No, definitely not that. That's opaque. Yeah, so we'll do the rich leather. And it was pretty yellowy though. So just to make sure that it kind of goes. If I had clear red, I would probably put that in, but you know, red is red. It's not exactly the most opaque thing going, and this orange is definitely, that's gotten a little crusty though. So just to tone it a little closer to the other color on the figure. Like I don't want them to be the same, but I want them to play nice together. And the other version is a little yellowy. And now I do want medium. I mean, you can do this with just water, and I often do. But adding a little medium can make it, if you find like glazes are too runny and it's hard to control, it won't, okay, maybe you don't want that much medium. It won't feel that much, it won't feel that way as much if you use like maybe not all of the medium in the world. That's why I should always poke it again instead of squeezing harder. And probably shake that more than I did. So just like if I was adding, you know, blue to yellow, I want to add just a little bit of blue. Like instead of trying to make that whole thing a glaze, it's going to be more efficient to do it that way. And then I'm going to test. I should have paper with text. Do I? So that's definitely, I can see all kinds of text under there. I mean, it's a little heavier than I might do a glaze if I was doing something like where Belinda was talking about adding color to cheeks. I would start off more conservatively than that and then do another coat. But for this function, I think I actually even want more pinks. Because I'm not getting, you know, a rich color deposit. Maybe I do want to go back to the yellowy color, and I could just do other colors over if I felt like I needed to. That's a bit better. So this will hopefully integrate this wear and tear stuff a little. I think I see some places where I forgot to put the dark color, but that is fine to do after. And here's where if I wanted to have physical properties, like I was talking before about how people would use somewhat, you know, use like a satin or semi-gloss paint to paint something like leather so that the finish of the paint is helping simulate the finish of the item. For my method, where I like everything to be matte while I'm working, this is where I could choose to do that if I wanted to. I could do it with, you know, instead of having used the matte brush on sealer, I could have added like a little bit of matte and a little bit of gloss. And even I find sometimes if I'm just doing this and I'm not thinning it a lot with water, it'll add just a little bit of a satiny look, but not enough to make taking photos annoying. Which is the other reason I like working in matte, because usually I'm taking photos of things when I'm done, and taking photos of shiny things is a special hell. For me, at least. Maybe more photographically adept people who are okay with it. a backpack that kind of... I used to get like a brown leather backpack, and I'd have to buy a new one every, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And by the end, it would totally, it would totally look like that. I took some pictures of the last one I had before I replaced it as reference for painting leather, because it had some really great wear and tear on it. Did I put the thing on her boots? Yes. So I think I've probably gone over. Oh, wow, I'm much closer to actual... I thought I was probably like, 45 minutes over, and Quinny's just like, I'm just going to sit here and see if she notices. Zachariah, oddly, all clock pieces have chainmail as well. Interesting. Well, I guess if you like sculpting tiny buckles, sculpting chainmail is going to be right up your alley. It's just buckles attached together. So there's a closer look at her. And the thing we haven't painted is a rip yet. I probably should have done that while I had these colors out. All right. Wendy said it's okay, because I think that Crow's Nest is clearly not. Oh, all of the aboves are clocks. Well, then he does like doing chainmail. My bladder only lets you all go over by a few minutes. Yeah, I feel you on that. But I am going to go over very slightly and see if this paint, and see if I can kind of make this look like a rip. Probably not, but we'll see. What I actually should do, I guess, is make that a patch of a different color. That might be fun. So yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'll come back and like put a patch of the blue on there. So I will do it later and give Quindy's bladder a break. So thank you all for hanging out with me and keeping me company, finding the words and the numbers of things for me, because I clearly was not at all prepared today. Hopefully that wasn't totally boring to watch me like mix colors and whatnot, ramble on. Glad to be back, hopefully. And I was worried that since I'd had the COVID that I'd start that horrible coughing thing again. I've been pretty lucky with not having that problem lately. So I was a little worried about today. I'm like, oh no, are we going to be back to the coughing? Nope. Yep, there we go. And happily, that did not happen. Yay. Because I can't get my medicine anymore, so I either have to take a very annoying medicine, or, I see it's still doing that, Quindy. It doesn't do that when I'm in test mode. It only does that when I'm streaming. So I will have to ask my husband to look at that again. He got sick too, so we're all very behind in whatever we were trying to do before. So I should be here next week. I don't think there's any reason I wouldn't. And maybe I will try to talk about MSP Open a little more. So if you have any questions about that, send me a message, and I will... Maybe I'll show, since the previous show where I went through kind of my miniatures to give you examples of what fits better in which category, and things like measuring stuff before you put it in your case and other stuff like that. I think I know that was before I switched cameras, so it might be worth doing again, because the miniatures are going to look totally different than they did on the old camera. So I'm going to let Queenie find us a raid. Thanks, Queenie. I'm glad to be back. I was lucky that I didn't get too much cough with this, because I have like a chronic cough problem. So if I get a cough, it can turn into a whole, and now I cough for months thing. So I was working very hard to not cough during the COVID. I was willing to take the other medicine because, since I already felt crappy, it didn't matter if I took medicine that made me feel crappy. But anyway, Quindy's going to find us a raid. I don't see one yet. And I'll come back next week and talk about MSP Open stuff. So let me know if you have questions about that. I mean, I can, I'll talk about contests generally too. Every contest is specific, but there's certainly some generalities about painting for competition that I will be happy to talk about if anyone has questions. We're going to be raiding Miniatures Den. So say hi, spread the Reaper love, and you can come watch him here on Wednesday if you would like, on the Reaper channel, which 1:30 Central, I want to say. But I'm going to sign off. There's a little timetable somewhere, and you can find that out later. Bye, everybody.